Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mom Says Tribe. Today, we are chatting to Farzana Bota, who's a segment solutions manager for Sunlam, and we will be chatting about everything savings. So, Farzana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to have you on the show today because we are going to be chatting about savings. So, I'm going to get straight into it if you don't mind. And then I have a few questions for you. Hopefully we can get through all of them, so fingers crossed. But let's get straight into it. So my
Sure.
first question is, what are some of the clever ways to start saving money as a family?
Okay. Well, I mean, you want to add a little bit of playfulness to it, a bit of energy so everyone gets on board, just like the principle of the savings jar with gamification. So, as a family, I think it'll be a fun way if you have maybe a little jar. In a more practical way, you can put money in for any reason, like celebrating a success of the day, or if someone saved any petty cash that they had for the day, or extra allowance that wasn't spent on money, you can probably put it in a jar and accumulate it for something. And something a little bit more tangible is I had a friend who had this envelope system. So she would create a bunch of envelopes at the start of the month, managing her household budget, and she would allocate money into different envelopes for different things. And all the spare change that she had in those envelopes, she would accumulate it towards some kind of reward at the end of the month or at the end of the year. And she also had an envelope for gifts and for presents for people's birthdays and things like that. So that's a fun way to save. And then if you want to get more serious about it as well, committed savings plans, something like maybe a tax-free saving, some kind of short-term savings vehicle, helping you to create a very clear objective and create a bit of structure to your saving is also a good way to do it. So depending where you are at as a family, and a nice way to get the whole family on board, you can start with a bit of play, use a strict system maybe like the envelope system, and then get some kind of policy in place that gives you a bit of structure and very specific outcomes to that saving.
It's nice that you mentioned the envelope thing because I think that's how my kids started. Growing up in Indian family, you'd always receive money from elders in the envelope.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what you grow up knowing, and I did that. And my kids still receive money from their grandparents in envelopes. So
Mm.
my youngest just started his saving jar, and he was very excited. He's like, "Oh, mommy, what is in this envelope?" And it's like money. He's like, "Wow," because he's not used to me doing
Mm.
it, but of course his grandparents do it. So that's, I mean, a lot of people do start there, but it's very clever to save for gifts as well in the envelope. So you kind of separate the savings and have
Yeah.
different savings instead of everything just together. So my next question to you is, what really helps build emergency savings? Now we are in, middle of a pandemic. It's been a crazy year for many of us, and I think personally I've learned how important emergency savings is. So what is your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, nothing helps you prepare or become more prepared for something than understanding consequence. Like, I mean, many of us learn the very hard way, a difficult way, that when emergencies come up, they cause financial distress. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to take a cue from horror stories and things that have happened around us to see what are those consequences to people, and that can help us to be a little bit more prepared in our own right. As you were mentioning a little bit from a cultural point of view, and I know in South Africa it's still a very cultural system. And you see, we tend to become responsible for our elders and our family members. And when there's emergencies that impact the collective family, it impacts you as well. So, understanding the consequence of what could potentially happen will help you to prepare better, make you a lot more cognizant of what you need to do to avoid certain distressful situations and to be well prepared financially for those situations. So I think that awareness is probably the first point, drawing on experience and examples that we've had growing up as well and from the community. You can see the impact of such emergencies and disasters, and you want to be prepared for them.
Okay, so I think this next question is more for me than anyone else because I used to suck at this. I am still trying to learn how to get good at savings, but should I be keeping track of my monthly spending on a spreadsheet? Because it feels like it's a lot of admin.
Yeah, look, the admin is always difficult in the beginning. I mean, and that's true for anything, whether you're studying a program or any system that you're doing. The admin in the beginning is always tedious, but the reward for that admin is priceless. So yes, I think it's an absolute great idea to have some sense of your cash flow. I read a book, I think it was by Robert Kiyosaki, and he was talking about we should run our finances like businesses do, and we should have a good sense of our cash flow, our income and expenditure. And the idea is to get to a point where you have more income than you have expenditure. And the only way to get to that point is to have a very realistic picture. And to create that picture, we have to take responsibility. And a good starting point is just a basic Excel spreadsheet that shows your income from various sources, whatever it is, even if it's just interest earned in the bank, and your expenses. And when I say expenses, I mean everything, like the charges that you pay for your bank fees and your credit card and all of that. And when you do it initially and you just populate it on a monthly basis, you'll see how astute you become around your own finances. It becomes second nature. So I do think it's absolutely worth the initial admin. And I'm sure there's a lot of applications that you can find online or little tools and resources that you can use to help you to just get started. But to answer your question, absolutely, you should track your finances.
Okay, I'm going to check online after this if I can find an easy template to get me started because I feel like I really need to do that. Okay, my next question is what is good debt versus bad debt?
Well, if I had to consider a good debt versus bad debt, and I've given this some thought, for me, there are certain instances where you absolutely have to get into debt. We might not necessarily have the lump sum, like to buy a house or a car, or maybe to fund university education. So if the thing that you are acquiring with that debt is essentially an asset, then I think it can be perceived as good debt because at the end of having paid off for a particular period, you are acquiring an asset in the process. But on the other hand, when you're using money to pay off some kind of expense that you've had, so you're now taking money, borrowing it, paying interest on it just to pay off another expense, then all you're doing is rolling those expenses and floating that debt. And that's what I would consider bad debt. So if you're taking a loan or using a credit card to pay an expense, then I would perceive that as bad debt. And usually those kinds of debts have significantly higher interest rates. So not only are you having to pay the money back, you're paying it back at twice as much as it would have costed you had you just delayed gratification where possible and not necessarily put yourself in bad debt.
Okay, so as we spoke about earlier, I mean, it is a crazy time for everyone right now. And
Yeah.
people are trying not to get into bad debt during this difficult time, but it's a tough one. So, any tips and advice on how we can avoid getting into bad debt during this specific time?
I'm sure as a mom, you know that discipline is that something that you probably tell your kids as well, or you try to enforce in them. So as a principal, I think even as adults, having some sense of discipline, being able to delay gratification, being able to sacrifice where necessary, can help us to avoid some of those financial circumstances like getting into bad debt. It's unfortunate a lot of us were not prepared for what has happened in the last year or so. But on the other hand, because it has happened, we have to start to make lifestyle changes. So there are ways in which we need to cut back, we need to negotiate. Do I spend money on takeout or do I cook once a week for five days in advance kind of thing? So there are certain ways that it might make us a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but the reward outweighs the discomfort. So I think that where possible, we need to enforce some discipline. We need to put some measures in place to just try and limit our expenses, try and change our lifestyle up a little bit, just to help us to navigate this period. And then once we get to the other side, and hopefully we have, even in this time, we're able to free up some capital and start to save, we come out better than we were going into this situation.
And I think you picked on an important point there, try to save. I mean, for lots of people, when you think savings, like, oh, I need to save like 1,000, 2,000 rand a month. And it's not. You can start as little as 5 rand in a jar. And, I've seen people who have done that consistently every day. And end of the year, they have a lot of money. So, I mean, savings is as little as 5 rand a day or whatever you can save. And, that's
Yeah.
something that I encourage my kids. And I think as you mentioned, it's so important to actually sit together as a family and discuss this. Like, how can we work together to make changes at home, or try and work together to just save a little bit every month, especially during this difficult time. Talking about family, my next question is, how can I teach my kids good money habits?
Okay, well, first one is that kids learn by example. So, as we've been discussing, you want to, as a family, have good money habits and you want to have a conversation and get everyone on board. So, if you start to make it a part of your habit at home where you're teaching them how to be frugal and how to use money better as an adult, then it's a behavior that they observe and they learn because they learn through observation. Another way that they can learn is through gamification. And as you've played in the beginning, we've got that Savings Jar app. And there's a lot of research on how gamification enhances the learning process. Because what it essentially does is that it shifts from expectation to fun. Okay, so there isn't a forced learning. So when someone is learning by their own accord and through gamification, learning sort of solidifies itself. So I think for a child, one, they're observing you. Two, they're learning unconsciously through gaming, and they're learning how to save money and to take care of their dragon and use their resources to grow their dragon. So that way it teaches them. And I think to make it a little bit more practical and bring it home, you maybe teach children how to earn. So when they have tasks, then the task should come with a certain reward. When there's a negative outcome that they've produced, it should come with a certain consequence so that they understand money principles in that way. So you link the financial reward to certain tasks and behaviors, and that also helps to cultivate the right behavior. And also it gets them to be handy around the house. It teaches them how to be responsible in multiple ways. It makes your life easier too, I think. Yeah.
Okay, talking about that app, if you missed it in the beginning of the live, let me just play it again for you so you have an idea of what we're talking about. So you can download the app and the App Store. And I promise you, it is loads of fun. My kids love it, and I'm actually using it to save. But yeah, I'm having lots of fun with it. And Prasanna is going to tell us a little bit more about it. But before we get there, I'm curious to know, because I have a 9-year-old, and at the beginning of her savings journey, she refused to even put her money in the bank. She's like, no, mommy, my money is safe with me. So I was trying to teach her about interest, and how the bank works. And that's a very big topic for a 9-year-old. So I'm hoping that you can teach me something about how to teach kids about interest.
Well, if I had to think about it, because I played around with the idea the other day and I was thinking, okay, how can we teach children practically about interest? And I think one of the ways most kids get an allowance, and the allowance, they tend to use it for things like cafeteria sweets and things like that. So maybe if you teach them, if you're going to give them an allowance weekly, versus if you're giving it to them monthly or if you're giving it to them every 3 months, help them to understand what is the effect of delaying taking the allowance and what you will give them in return for that delayed gratification. And then that's how you can probably teach them the effect of interest over time. So if I give it to you weekly, I'll give you 5 Rand in a 4-week period. If I give it to you monthly, instead of giving you 20 Rand, I'll give you 22 Rand because you've now delayed taking your allowance. So does that sound better to you? And then you're teaching them certain principles in that way as well. And then conversely, if you owe them something, so say they've done a chore or something like that and money is owed to them, then help them to understand that the longer you take to pay them, that maybe there's a certain amount extra that you need to pay because you've delayed paying them. So you can help them learn the effect of interest if something is owed to you.
That's actually a very good way of teaching her. And I need to actually sit down with her and talk about this. But on that about interest, I encourage my kids to start their own business, something little, or, even if they do a little bit chores or help me out here and there, I would say, you might earn a buck or two. So my daughter started her own business last year during lockdown. because she saw this toy that she really wanted on TV. And she's like, Mommy, I want it. And I was like, we need to think twice about that because of our budget. But you can do something to earn money. So she started her own massage.
Oh wow.
What can I say? It's not even a spa, but it's kind of there, getting there, maybe. Well, it was open to family only because she could see that everyone was so stressed at home with everything going
Clever.
on. So she started earning money that way. And of course, my boys are looking at her and it's like, oh, Kitana's getting money for doing something. So my question to you is, should we be encouraging kids to earn their own money from young, and how to save it?
Absolutely. I think it's very, very important. For one, it teaches them a bit of self-directed behaviors. So it also teaches them about delayed gratification, because there she saw a toy. She wasn't able to get it immediately. So she had to come up with a way in which to get to that point. So that's a very clever way to teach them. So learning how to perform certain tasks and using their skills and talents to acquire the finances for things that they would like is a very good thing to learn. I mean, for those people, my spouse, for example, is a medical professional, and he spent his whole life or learning around medicine, but he never actually learned finances. And if he had learned that from an early age, it's something that he could carry with him, that even now as an entrepreneur, those kind of behaviors help him to build better behaviors. So I think as a child, it's so important, it's fundamental, and the things that we learn, a lot of our behaviors sort of stick with us. So I think in the research that we read on around the savings jar, that kids form habits as early as 7. So if you can teach them how to be entrepreneurial as early as 7, especially in the economy that we're in now, where a lot of the occupations as well are more contractual, and the work environment is so dynamic, teaching a person how to be entrepreneurial early in life is very, very important. So what your child's done is very clever, because she learned how to see a need and fill a need, both herself, her own needs, as well as those in her family. So it's very clever. And then in terms of how do I use that money? So if you think about a physical jar or that envelope system, maybe you can teach her that if you put it in this envelope, you can access this envelope in 6 months for this particular purpose, and this is how much will be in this envelope, so it will get you to this point in this period, and this is how much you need to fill this envelope by. So you can make it very practical and tangible and create this system for her. If she prefers, I mean, kids these days are so digitally inclined and tech savvy, so using the savings jar will probably be a good way to teach her how to use it digitally, how to delay gratification, set a very specific goal, and then go about getting to that goal through different behaviors and doing different tasks. So yeah, I think it's very clever what she's done. It's a pity she hasn't gone national, so we can't really
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe after the pandemic,
proper
post-pandemic.
Indian massage.
Exactly. Talking about the savings jar. So I know what the savings jar is, but everyone that's watching this video, what exactly is the savings jar and why should parents download it?
Okay, so the savings jar is, like you said, it's an application for kids. And if you've been with us this whole time, you see we've been talking about savings behaviors and how to teach families how to save and why it's so important. And we also believe so strongly that it's principles that we need to learn as children as well. And that's why we've created this application, because we want to help parents to help their children become more financially savvy. So the application is actually a gaming tool, and what it does is that it allows the child to have a little dragon, and as they do different quests and tasks, they're able to save money in a digital jar, and the money accumulates to get them to achieve their objective in the different quests. Now, obviously, there's a lot of research behind how gamification helps in terms of learning outcomes, and it also, children who learn through play, that kind of learning sort of sticks with them. So we think creating a fun element around something as sensitive as finances, especially in a country like South Africa, where a lot of people do not have the right savings culture. Using a tool like the savings jar through gamification will help children to enjoy the process and learn in a way that sticks with them. So that tool is, like you said, you were playing with it as well. It's lots of fun. I've also downloaded it, and as you scan your cell phone around the house, you see this dragon popping up, and you set your different quests. Do you want to help a family member? You select the amount that you want, that you will need for that particular purpose. And then as you play around and you accumulate money in the jar, it lets you know how close you are to that particular goal. Further research that we've done as well is that when you have very goal-specific outcomes for your savings, it helps you on that journey. So if you're just saving without a purpose, like in anything in life, anything without a very defined purpose, you lose momentum along the way. But if we create very specific outcomes, even in the game, the child is engaged, the child is motivated to continue, and then that helps the child to save towards those specific goals. Okay, so that's in a nutshell. The idea is that you create a quest and you use your skills and talents to get you along that journey. And then once you get to that journey, you have a sense of gratification and reward. So you understand the process of input and output.
Can I be honest? You know what's my favorite part of the app? It's just slotting the coin in the jar.
Yeah, I love that sound. Don't you love that sound?
I do. It's like, yay, I've like finally got money in my jar. And, you know, my kids love doing it as well. So over the weekend, my kids got more money from their grandparents because, of course, they heard that they're using the Sanlam savings jar to save. So my youngest came home and he's like, Mommy, can we do that thing? And I'm like, what thing? And then I realized he was talking about the app because that's what we've been doing to track our savings. Thank you so much, Farzana, for joining us this morning on Mom Says Live. It was really lovely chatting to you and just, you know, hearing tips from you, the expert at Sanlam, just helping us understand savings better and how to teach our kids. Enjoy your day, and I hopefully will chat to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope it was of value to you guys, and all the best in your savings journey.
That was Farzana from Sanlam. Thank you, Sanlam, for joining us on today's show to chat about savings. So if you haven't downloaded the Sanlam Savings Jar yet, you should, because I promise you, it's so exciting for the entire family. We'll chat soon. Stay safe and keep well.